So now I'm going to introduce Amy, Francis, and Emily from Sierra Harvest to deliver the How Inclusive is Your Farm to School program session. So please help us welcome Amy, Francis, and Emily from Sierra Harvest. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nick, for that introduction. And thank you to all of you for sticking with us through this last session of the day. We wanted to start out just by having you introduce yourselves. You may have already several times, but we'd love to see that come through again to see who's joining us. We have just a few suggestions for you, your name, your preferred pronouns, and then we'd love to hear whose land you're on currently. And if you haven't had the opportunity to explore that yet, we have a link here, and I think one of my coworkers will be throwing it in the chat shortly if you need a clickable. But you can just put in where you are, and it'll tell you whose land you are currently on. So we'd love to see those pop up. All right, well, feel free to continue throwing those in while I move on to the next slide. I want to tell you who we are. Nick did a great job of introducing us, but we also want to introduce ourselves. So presenting with me today, we have Amy Retzler. She's our Executive Director at Sierra Harvest. We have Emily Kohler. She's our Food Love Farm Director. And I'm Frances DiCristina. I'm our Farm to School Director with Sierra Harvest. And we are joining you today from the ancestral lands of the Nisenan. We wanted to, I know I've got you throwing things in the chat, but we also are going to start a poll. We wanted to see where you are currently in cultivating food justice into your farm to school program. We are going to share with you the journey that we're on. We are not at the destination by any means, but we want to see, we know some of you have already been doing this work long before us, and hopefully what we share today can help those who haven't yet started get started. And if anyone's getting their PhD, we'll just go ahead and hand the presentation off to you and sit back. All right, I have a sneak peek at the results. So it looks like we have a lot of people interested in getting started and ideas in progress. One person taking me up on getting the PhD in their topic. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling and share the results. So we're about half ideas in progress, a little bit less than half of interested in getting started, and one ready to share some success. That's wonderful. We'll have time for that towards the end of the presentation. We're really looking forward to hearing what other people are doing, and that PhD will have to raise their hand and let me know. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to my co-presenter, Emily.
Okay, so as we get started, I'd like to start off by kind of grounding and centering us in this journey that we're about to start on for the next 45 minutes or hour. And we would really like for this to be a conversation. So if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. I would love to read this long quote to you so that you don't have to do that. So let's take a moment and close our eyes. This topic of food justice that we'll dive into together, I would like to recognize that we're all in different places, maybe in this conversation, and that we might have different feelings about this, this topic or where we're at. And I would like to welcome you to bring all of that with you today. It might be discomfort or vulnerability or excitement or some fear or nervousness. And just feel welcome to bring all of that to the table today and be willing to open up conversation and communication about it. So close your eyes, take a breath if you'd like, and I'll read this to you. Food justice is important for everyone because food is culture. Food is your family. Food is part of how we communicate with one another. It's a way we share our love. Being able to enjoy and prepare food that actually nourishes the body and keeps us healthy is connected to our ability to stay sane as human beings. And another deep breath if you'd like as you open your eyes and we move forward with this conversation. So as we start and dive in together, let's start with this question. What is food justice? And if you'd like to, if you're using the digital workbook, you can find our page on page 12. And there's a little spot for you to explore this question there on that page and jot some notes down. And also, if you'd like to, I invite you to drop in the chat what this brings up for you. What is food justice? If you'd like to share a word or a phrase, even a feeling, what does this mean to you? And I just want to briefly kind of mention that as I was researching and reading for this particular slide, I was thinking a lot about language and the way that language shapes the work that we do. It shapes our conversations in our organizations and in community, and with the relationships that we build with people. So it's important. Language, the language that we use is important. And in defining terms, it's important that these definitions should serve and also be informed by the communities that they seek to represent. So I'm going to ask Francis if you could drop that link in the chat. I found a really wonderful article that talks about how we define food justice in the work that we do. So give that a read if you have a chance. It's really good and will kind of get you thinking about the way that we use language in our work. But I'll read a quick definition just so we can kind of center ourselves on the same page for today. Food justice is communities exercising their right to grow, sell, and eat healthy food. Healthy food is fresh, nutritious, affordable, culturally appropriate, and grown locally with care for the well-being of the land, workers, and animals. People practicing food justice leads to a strong local food system, self-reliant communities, and a healthy environment. And that definition comes from an organization called Just Food. And I see that there are some, a lot of those same ideas that you've dropped into the chat here about what food justice means to you. So thanks for sharing those thoughts. And let's go to the next slide.
All right, so my name's Amy Rutzler, and I would love to just acknowledge the time that you guys are taking to talk about this important topic. And I want to let you know a little bit about who Sierra Harvest is if you're not familiar. We've been around for about 13 years. And we are on a mission to transform lives and strengthen our community using fresh, local, seasonal food. We have the privilege of serving dozens of farmers, hundreds of families, and thousands of children throughout Western Nevada County. And we operate the Farm to School program in that part of the county for about 10,000 children and 26 school sites. And even though most of our programs were actually built on a foundation of equity, it oftentimes feels like we are just beginning this journey. We're just beginning to really explore what food justice means. And you might be wondering why 3 white women are talking to you about food justice. Well, we are committed to doing the work as individuals and as a team. And throughout 2020, we kept noticing a bunch of opportunities to just do better in creating equitable access to all of this beautiful local fresh food that we are surrounded with in Nevada County. And we noticed all of a sudden, and this is going to sound familiar, that the food pantry needs were tripling all around us, and the free and reduced lunch rate was significantly more than it had been the year before. And our county food service teams were really struggling and challenged to simply put any food on the plate versus really nutritious whole food. So this is when we decided we're going to get pretty serious about food justice. That was our call to action. And as I mentioned, we are a team of dedicated educators, farmers, and community members that are working to dismantle the inequities in our food system. And a couple of ways that we are doing that, on the top left, it's a picture of our gleaning program where we harvested and delivered 25,000 pounds of fresh organic food to food pantries last year during the pandemic. And in the top right, we work to connect institutional buyers with local producers And here's a picture of our hospital food service team in action with local organic butternut squash. In the bottom right, we have a farmer training program, and we give farmers, particularly new farmers, business and ag skills so that they can operate viable farming businesses. And of course, last but not least, we do have the privilege of teaching kids about specialty crops all year long through our Farm to School program. So that's a little bit about Sierra Harvest. And next, I want to go on to what we're going to use the rest of our time together. Here's our agenda for the day. Emily's going to walk us through understanding where the process might be starting, whether it's Sierra Harvest or for you. We're going to hear about what steps Sierra Harvest has taken to cultivate food justice in our work. We are also going to have an opportunity as a team to identify opportunities within our own Farm to School programs across the state and how we might incorporate and integrate more food justice into our programming. And last, we're going to have a chance to brainstorm and just share food justice resources, because we can learn as much from you as you might be learning from us today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, and she's going to talk about where the process might begin.
So like I mentioned, we are all on our own journeys and we're all in different places. And what we've noticed as a staff at Sierra Harvest is that this process that we're moving through generally has followed a similar path. And that's sort of laid out here in this slide. And for each of us, we can only start where we are. And that means starting with your own personal and professional education and growth on diversity and equity and inclusion. That might be trainings or reading or research on your own, and really just kind of opening up and digging into where you are with your beliefs and how you're moving through the world and being able to recognize that. And as you do that, of course, you'll start to see your limitations. We, as our team here of 3 white women, we are seeing through our lens of privilege, and we have to recognize that and recognize that limitation. And then we can really begin the work, which leads us to asking lots of questions and incorporating and engaging with voices that are different from our own. And then that can lead us to developing a plan. That can be our personal plan for the work that we're doing, or an organizational plan for where and how we can move forward and who can support us. And I'm actually going to add one that's not on this slide, but I think is really important, and that is be ready to stumble and be ready to be uncomfortable and to humble yourself, and really to know that you're going to get it wrong and to keep moving forward anyway. There's no end to this process that we're moving through. It's circular and ongoing. So you'll find yourself revisiting these steps many times over as you work to become, work towards food justice in yourself and in your organization. So as our organization began to really take a look at our work and how it related to food justice, we began to ask questions in these 3 categories so that we could start to focus the work that we're doing. When we look at land, we're asking questions like, whose land are we on? And how do people come to own land in our country? Who has access to land in our community? And what are the barriers that folks have to owning and to using land in our community? When we look at labor, the questions that we have are things like, who is doing the work of growing, processing, selling food in our community? And what are the challenges and injustices that these folks might be facing? And then also, who's reaping the benefits of this work that's being done in our food system? And then lastly, we're looking at access and asking questions like, does your zip code affect what food you get to eat? And do your food pantries have fresh food available for folks that are utilizing those resources? And how can we support that in happening? How can we support food pantries in distributing local fresh food? So in looking at all of those topics and diving more specifically into some of our programs, we started to look at our Harvest of the Month program, which you're probably familiar with. Our program delivers a monthly local fruit or vegetable to 33 schools. And when we looked at this program, we were thinking of how can we move towards food justice in this program? And some ideas that we had are highlighting the diversity in nature by offering fruits and vegetables in different colors. Can we highlight land issues by asking questions about where our farms are located, the farms in our community that we're sourcing food from for our Harvest of the Month program, and who was historically on that land, and how can we incorporate that idea into our Harvest of the Month educational programming. And finally, we can ask questions about farm ownership. Can we highlight labor issues by prioritizing purchasing from BIPOC or women-owned and operated farms? And another example of how our process is moving forward, we can go back to the previous slide when we talked about engaging voices that were different from our own. And as we thought about that and saw our faces on the Zoom screen panel here, we knew that we needed support from a wider range of voices, and that we were coming from a pretty narrow perspective. So we're currently building an advisory council, and right now it's specific to our Harvest of the Month program. And we have members that bring voices that represent a diversity of backgrounds. This might be ethnicity or life experience. Our members are also representing different populations that they serve. So this might be low-income families or a Spanish-speaking community, and also experiences with diverse target audiences. So that for us means that we're working with teachers. So some of our advisory group members have specific experience working with educators and can support us in connecting with teachers. And some of the lessons that we're learning as we build and develop this advisory group are really working to find a balance between incorporating diverse voices and also being careful to not burden the BIPOC leaders in our community. We're also exploring how to compensate folks for their time and energy. And also we are aware that our advisory group is still a fairly limited perspective. So we're working to engage with a wider range of perspective and voices on our group.
Okay, thank you, Emily. We are going to take a movement break because at the end of the day, if you've been on Zoom all day, we all need to stretch and move. So we are going to take a page from the distance learners all across our state and do a specialty crop scavenger hunt. So if you can please stand up and go find the most interesting specialty crop you have on hand. That can be in your pantry, that can be in your fridge. If it's currently planted in your garden, you don't need to go unearth it, we trust you. But go stretch, go grab something, bring it back, and we will then continue on with this discussion.
Love the chat. I don't even know what a finger lime is, so this is part of the process about education. So we are at a point in the agenda where we want to turn the focus on you and talk about where you are now with your programs and with food justice. And our entire staff and board and some interested community members participated in a food justice training last fall called Uprooting Racism in Food Systems. And it was conducted by Soulfire Farms out of New York. So if you've also done this training or similar trainings, please throw that into the chat. We would love to just know what people are engaged in as far as this topic and what is available out in the communities. One of the most valuable parts of this training was a framework. for our teams to begin to use some common language to evaluate where we are now and where we want to be in the future, so that we could advance our work around food justice. And this framework has 4 parts, and these definitions are in your digital workbook, so you don't need to like speed write them down, but I'm just going to go through them right now. So you or your organization, you can think about this as an individual or as a part of a team, but you might find yourself in a zone of being complicit, and that's just simply bystanding and not really thinking about food justice issues. You might be questioning, looking for opportunities, but you may not have a plan yet. You could be dismantling, actively developing and implementing plans to integrate food justice into your current farm to school program. You also might very well be on the front lines. You've already gone out there and you've tested programs and you have something that works and it feels pretty cutting edge inclusive. And so you're going to get an opportunity to share some of that later on. So what we'd love to do is launch a poll and really ask yourself, how inclusive is your farm to school program right now? And I want to encourage people to think about their answer before they respond. And if choosing complicit feels, if there's any shame in that, I will tell you, I would have said that for our organization 1 year ago. We were absolutely bystanding. And so there's no shame in admitting that, because it's really about having a unique view and a new lens to do this work through. And it's about being transparent. And honestly, if you're in the complicit area, you actually have the most opportunity in front of you. So I'm starting to see some of the poll results come in. So we've got about 20% that says, yeah, I'm bystanding right now. We've got 50+% in the questioning zone. We've got just under 20% in dismantling. Woo, and we got 6% on the front lines. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out when we get to a future exercise. So thank you so much. Half the group is in questioning, which is fantastic. That is a fantastic place to be. So congratulations on that. Yeah, so there are the results. All right, and I wanted to just share a few examples of where Sierra Harvest is at when we are in the zone of questioning right now. So in our school garden program, we are asking ourselves, do we have school gardens in the places that are meeting the most need, or have we been rewarding schools that have enhanced resources, meaning they have a PTC that knows how to fundraise a lot of money, so they get a school garden? Those are questions we're asking ourselves. And another area is the photos we use. Are they reflecting the diversity of the area we live in, or are we employing tokenism? And I'm not proud to say that we have employed tokenism in the past, and I am proud to say that we are aware that we've done it, and now we have awareness to move forward on that topic. I would say in the next slide, we have some examples of programs where we are dismantling, right? And one of the things that I think a lot of programs struggle with is in farm field trips. The problem is always transportation is a barrier. Busing is expensive. And, the solution could be offering stipends, right, to those schools that maybe have higher free and reduced lunch percentages. And then when you look at school food, problems with poor quality meals, right, that immediately leads to health inequities. And so a solution could be offering more scratch cooked meals that can really help bridge that gap. And that is something that we are engaged in right now as a pretty big project. All right, so those are just a couple examples of where Sierra Harvest is going with using that framework of complicit, questioning, dismantling, and front lines. So I'm going to turn it back over to Francis, and we're going to get an opportunity to do some group sharing on this topic.
All right, thanks, Amy. So we'd like to use a Padlet to gather all of the wonderful knowledge that you have from the 2 polls we've done so far. We know that you all are in the work as well, and we want to have just a collective gathering of ideas, whether there's something you're already doing or something that you'd like to do, or something that's been inspired by this conference so far. So we're going to move over to Padlet. I know that several of the other presenters have used this so far, so many of you might be familiar with it. But it's basically, you know, if we were in person, we'd give you all Post-it notes and have you throw your ideas up on a flip chart around the room. And instead, we're going to go to a digital format. And we have several categories we'd like you to throw your ideas into. So when you get to the Padlet, it'll look like this screenshot here. So the categories for you to add your ideas to are in the classroom, in the garden, in the cafeteria. And then as you scroll over to the right, if you don't see it all when you first pull it up, just please scroll over, because we also have partnerships. We'd love to hear who else you're engaging in this work. And then also individually, if you have things that you're working on individually, because as we've mentioned, that's an important process too. And then also just another category for anything that we haven't thought of as we prepared this. So I'm going to throw the Padlet link into the chat. And if you can click on that and start adding your ideas, then I will flip over so we can watch the ideas as you add them. So next, we wanted to share some resources that our team has used. This is also in your digital workbook, so you don't, as I think Amy shared, you don't need to scribble furiously. But one that Amy already mentioned was the Soulfire Farm training entitled Uprooting Racism. And as she mentioned, the staff and board all participated that last fall, and it was incredibly valuable. We highly recommend it. Everyone got something out of it. Everyone left feeling inspired. People at every level of this work found it valuable. So we can't recommend that enough. Another one that Emily participated in was called Rooting Out Racism. And it's a training conducted by Service to Justice. And so if you'll have Emily's contact information if you want to reach out to her regarding that specifically. She participated in that and found it really valuable on top of the other training. So also Justice in June, which was a series that I believe Amy has participated in. And then also the Seen White podcast series from Seen on Radio that you can find on any podcast host that you use. If you have resources that you've used, we'd love for you to share that in the chat. We'll be capturing that information, and we'd love to share it back out. We know that each of you have probably done even more work than our little team could have found yet. So we'd love to both find that for ourselves and to share back out. So please do throw that into the chat. And then while that's happening, your other assignment is we'd love for you to take some time to write down something that you want to take away from this. You know, people find that if you write something down, you're more likely to really internalize it, have it, you know, remind you. If you're using the digital workbook, there's a space for this. Or if you're more of a pencil and paper kind of a person, go ahead and jot it down, throw it on your fridge to remind you of it. But we'd love you to just write down some actions that you want to take to really commit to taking the first step in this, if this is the beginning of this journey for you, or continue on if this is something you're already working on. So thoughts of things to write down would be, what actions do you want to take? Who do you need to engage if you've thought of new partnerships you can be building? And then maybe give yourself a deadline. And whether that's, you know, certainly congratulations if it's a deadline to complete the work, but even if it's just by, you know, March 31st, I will have reached out to one new person for this work. So we'd love for you to take the time to do that. And then we also encourage you to throw some questions in the chat. We have a few more minutes left. And so if we are able to answer it, we'd love to. Otherwise, we will see if we can find someone to refer you to or follow up later.
All right, I'm seeing a bunch of really great resources that I had no idea existed. Thank you, Krista. So you want to talk about Racebook? That's awesome. Yeah, Teresa, permaculture ethics, earth care, people care, fair share. That's awesome. I had no idea that existed. So yeah, keep the share coming. Keep the share coming. What we'd love to do to help wrap this up is just do one last Zoom poll. And it's really asking yourself, how inclusive will your farm to school program become? So you've had a tiny bit of time to see what Sierra Harvest has done. You have a new framework to use with complicit questioning, dismantling, and front lines, and you've been able to learn from others in your network today. So please go ahead and take the poll, and let's see how the answers come out. While people are throwing their answers into the poll, I do want to share one story. And when I think about it, it's kind of shocking, but it is true. It actually happened in Nevada County about 9 years ago. We had a school district that actually had a line for lunch for paying kids and a different line for lunch for kids that were on the free and reduced lunch program. And when our team found out about that, we went straight to the school board meeting and asked them if they knew it was happening. And they didn't realize it was happening. So it was a wonderful way to engage in a very productive conversation to dismantle the injustice that was happening for children in our school food program. And I'm happy to say that it happened very quickly, just because we showed up at the meeting. So pay attention and look out for these opportunities that might be right in front of your face so that you don't end up being a bystander. All right, so the poll results are in. Wow, this is awesome. See the shift? No, but nobody's gonna hang out in the complicit zone. That's awesome. Yeah, we've got 23% in questioning, 40% in dismantling. That's fantastic. And look at that, almost the same in front line. So that is fantastic. Congratulations, you guys. And I hope that you found this session helpful with some ideas and sharing within the network and maybe a new framework with those 4 zones to talk, within your teams and as individuals to think about your work in food justice and your farm to school program. All right. And we do have time for questions. I just want to say thank you so much. We do have a little bit of time for questions, maybe just a couple minutes. And thank you for continuing to throw things into the chat as well.
Looks like we have a question from Nick. How did you approach leaders for your advisory group? Amy, do you want to take that?
You can take it.
All right, we brainstormed a list of people and reached out based on personal relationships we had, professional relationships we had. We tapped on our board members. That was helpful as well to engage them if they had, some of them had relationships that we didn't, and just to have a personal outreach and share what our goal for this project is. And as Emily mentioned, we do plan to compensate them for their time in some way. And we've had really enthusiastic responses on the whole. The main no's we've gotten are just, as Emily mentioned, because this is such a topic in the forefront of people's minds right now, fortunately, a lot of our local leaders in the BIPOC community are being tapped for everything right now. And so that has been, I see there's what's the biggest challenge you face so far? That might be it. Is that we want to engage voices beyond ours. And we also, as Emily mentioned, don't want to burden them and have every single person wanting the leader of the local Nisanan group, to work with them as we would love for her to work with us. So I think that is helpful. We also have a question from Estella. Marsha, are you able to unmute?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering, for one, I want to thank you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful conference so far and appreciate it. However, as I was listening in yesterday, I realized then that we were sharing a lot about school, farm to school. And I was wondering, where this applies to preschool, because it talked about K through 12. So that kind of threw me in a loop. So I was just wondering, and I think somebody did respond to contact somebody about the resources, but do you have any other information to share? How is this program also catered to preschool programs, state preschool programs?
So I would say we don't have one specific thing we would recommend just yet. We don't focus on, we're mostly K through 12, so we don't focus on preschool. But I will say that that has been one of the things we've been trying to do is tailor what we do talk about to age groups, right? So you can't talk with a first grader about the same topics as a 10th grader. And so we want that 10th grader to be challenged with more, advanced information than what you would talk with a first grader about. So I will say that that's both an important thing to consider as you both discover resources and develop your own. But I can't say that I have a preschool program to recommend. If someone else does, then we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, because we're on over a half an acre of a natural environment, and we were real excited about this, conference. And I think you have wonderful resources that could be applied. We're also a mentor site with our local college, and we are Ratio Inspired, which is emergent curriculum, and we work with our partners on mini grants for, like seed to plant and farm to school, and we want to connect with farmers and community, but it didn't feel like there was an avenue for us. So is there anybody that we can share with to advocate, or maybe somebody's already, started some sort of advisory on it? I'm not sure. Who would be my contact person?
Hi, Estella. This is Nick. It would be me.
Hi, Nick. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
and I responded,
Nick.
and we'll reach out to you. There are a lot of resources for early childhood education as well. So if you email us, we can set up a call together and talk through what those resources are and the different
That
ways.
would be wonderful. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm connecting to our community with Cocoa Kids that are sponsored through First Five, and I shared about your conference, and everybody's excited. So I will share it. But yeah, we would love to partner. Thank you,
Okay.
Nick.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, and I don't see any other questions. So as Amy said, thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you to the team at CDFA for hosting this conference and giving us the opportunity to share even during these strange times. So.